Amina woke up that Saturday morning with a quiet determination in her heart. She was not the type of person who usually went out looking for attention, nor did she enjoy being the center of a crowd. She preferred her small apartment, her books, and her evening walks through the park. But today felt different. Today she wanted to try something new, something she had only seen in movies or heard about from a few friends. She wanted to visit the shooting range. The idea had been resting in her mind for months. She remembered the time she promised herself she would try activities that tested her focus and patience. Some people learned yoga, others took up painting or gardening. Amina had already tried those things. But when her neighbor once spoke about target shooting as a sport of precision and calm, she felt a quiet spark inside her. It was not about the noise of the shot or the power of the equipment. It was about stillness, timing, and breath. That was what interested her. When she told her cousin about her plan, the cousin laughed softly and said, "You? At a shooting range? They'll think you're lost." Amina had smiled politely, but the comment stayed with her. She knew people might doubt her, but she didn't want those doubts to rule her life. She wanted to go for her own growth, not for approval. So here she was, standing in front of the large glass doors of the local sports shooting center. The building was modern, with neat walls painted in gray and blue, and a bold sign at the top, "Precision Target Range." She felt her palms grow damp as she pushed the door open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of metal and polish. Bright lights hung from the ceiling, reflecting off clean floors. The reception desk was ahead, and behind it stood a cheerful woman with short hair and a red vest. Amina walked over slowly, her steps echoing on the tiles. "Good morning," Amina said. "Good morning. First time here?" the receptionist asked warmly. "Yes," Amina replied, nodding. "Wonderful. We'll need you to read and sign these safety guidelines first." She slid a sheet of paper across the counter. Amina took it carefully and began to read. The rules were clear: keep the equipment pointed only at targets, listen to the officer's instructions, wear ear and eye protection, and respect others' space. She signed at the bottom with a steady hand and returned the sheet. The receptionist handed her a pair of earmuffs and protective glasses. "You can rent basic equipment over there," she added, pointing to a counter lined with gear. Amina thanked her and moved toward the counter. She rented a simple set, nothing shiny, nothing advanced. Just the basic tools for beginners. The man at the counter showed her how to check that everything was safe and ready. She listened carefully, asking questions when she wasn't sure. Finally, she stepped into the main hall. That was when she noticed them, 3 men in polished jackets, standing together at one lane. Their gear sparkled with chrome, and they laughed loudly at some private joke. Amina lowered her eyes and walked toward an empty lane, trying not to draw attention. But she could hear them whispering. "Look at her, so plain. Did she borrow that stuff?" one said. Another chuckled, "She'll probably miss the target board entirely." Amina's face grew warm, but she said nothing. She placed her equipment down carefully, remembering every instruction she had read. The mocking voices stung, but she reminded herself, she had not come here for them. She had come here for her promise, her growth, and her peace of mind. The range officer, a tall woman with kind eyes, walked over and gave Amina setup a quick glance. "First time?" she asked. "Yes," Amina admitted. "You're doing well so far. Remember, feet firm, shoulders loose, eyes steady. And don't rush." "Thank you," Amina said, feeling a little stronger with the encouragement. The officer gave her a nod and moved on. Amina adjusted her stance. She watched the signal lights above the lanes, saw the targets lined far away, and felt her heartbeat quicken. Around her, other participants fired their shots. The sound was sharp, but the earmuffs softened it into dull thuds. The trio of snobby shooters nearby let out another burst of laughter, this time louder. One of them fired wildly and cheered at his own attempt. Another boasted about his expensive gear. They were showy, loud, and careless in tone, but they carried themselves as if they owned the place. Amina focused on her breathing. She thought of her other hobbies, the way she always calmed her hands while sewing tiny stitches. She imagined she was threading a needle, steady and precise. The noise around her faded for a moment. She exhaled slowly. Her hands trembled just a little, but she gripped the equipment gently, not tightly. She set her feet apart, let her shoulders drop, and drew in a deep breath. She thought of her promise again, to trust herself, to try without fear, to focus only on the moment. Behind her, the laughter continued. She heard one of them say, maybe she should take notes instead of trying. But instead of letting the words pierce her, she let them drift away. She told herself, the target doesn't care who you are. It only listens to patience and focus. The lights flashed, signaling the next round. Amina raised her hands, aligning herself with care. She was not planning to compete. She was not planning to impress. She only wanted to try, once, with full honesty. And with that thought, she readied herself for her very first attempt. Amina stood in her lane, her focus narrowing to the target in front of her. The signal light blinked, giving her the permission to begin. Around her, the sound of shots echoed, sharp thuds that bounced off the high walls of the shooting hall. She felt her chest tighten, but she reminded herself, one step at a time. Just as she lifted her hands to prepare, laughter broke out again from the trio of men in the polished jackets. They were at the next lane, showing off their equipment and cracking jokes. Careful, one of them said in a loud voice, pretending to whisper. She might point it the wrong way. The second one snickered. Maybe she came here by mistake. This isn't knitting class. The third chuckled the loudest, slapping his knee as if the comment was the funniest thing in the world. Amina's heart raced. For a second, she thought about leaving. She had no interest in being the subject of jokes. But then she remembered why she was here. She had promised herself she wouldn't let fear stop her. She didn't want to give up before even trying. So instead of reacting, she fixed her gaze on the target board. She blocked out their words, letting them float away like background noise. The range officer walked by, her sharp eyes landing briefly on the group of men. Keep your focus, she said firmly to everyone. Respect the rules and respect others. The trio went quiet for a moment, though smirks still played on their faces. Amina exhaled slowly. She adjusted her stance again, placing one foot slightly forward, relaxing her shoulders, and aligning herself with the center of the target. She remembered the advice she had read, don't fight your breath. Flow with it. Her fingers trembled, but she tightened her grip gently. She could feel the weight in her hands, heavier than she had imagined when she first signed up for this activity. But she didn't let the weight scare her. She steadied herself, inhaled deeply, and held the air for a second. Then she lowered her hands. She wasn't ready yet. See? She's afraid, one of the men whispered to his friends. But Amina wasn't afraid, not anymore. She was being patient. She wanted her very first shot to be done right, not rushed. She decided to take another moment to observe the room. Other shooters around her were busy with their own lanes. Some were beginners like her, struggling to hit the paper at all. Others looked more practiced, sending their shots in neat groups near the center. The hall was filled with concentration, determination, and a kind of energy that came from people pushing themselves. She liked that. It made her feel that she belonged here too, even if others couldn't see it yet. A friendly staff member, who had been walking down the line to check equipment, paused near her. Take your time, he said in a low, encouraging voice. One good shot is better than 10 rushed ones. Amina nodded gratefully. The trio behind her heard it too, and one of them laughed again. One good shot. She'll be lucky if she can keep it on the board. The staff member shot them a sharp glance but didn't say anything. He moved on, leaving Amina with a little more courage. She straightened up again. She decided that she would ignore every sound except her own breath. She closed her eyes for a second, listening to the rise and fall of air in her chest. She let the tension in her shoulders melt away. When she opened her eyes, she saw only the target sheet, white with black rings, waiting silently at the far end. The signal light blinked again, giving her another chance. This time, she lifted her hands smoothly. Her elbows were steady, her shoulders even. She placed her finger gently, feeling the contact, but not rushing. Her breath slowed, her chest steady. She remembered stitching how she used to thread the tiniest needles with calm, not with force. She thought of that same stillness now. The mocking voices behind her faded into nothing. The laughter of the trio turned into muffled noise, like distant echoes. The loud pops from other shooters melted into background hums. It was just her and the target. Her hands stopped trembling. She exhaled. And then she lowered her hands once more. Not because she was scared, but because she had realized something important. She wanted to make sure she understood every step before she actually tried. So instead of firing, she practiced the motion without completing it. She raised, aligned, breathed, paused, and lowered. Again and again, like rehearsing a dance. The trio groaned loudly. "Oh, come on," one said. "Is she ever going to try? Maybe she's just here for the air conditioning," another laughed. But Amina didn't care. Her practice wasn't wasted. Every dry run gave her more comfort. She could feel her body adjusting, her mind growing calmer. She was teaching herself patience in a room full of noise. The range officer noticed her and gave a nod of approval. "That's good practice," she said while walking by. "Don't let anyone rush you." That small sentence gave Amina even more strength. She placed the equipment back on the bench, sipped from her water bottle, and looked at her target again. It felt like the sheet was waiting for her, patient and kind, just like she was being with herself. Around her, the men continued their noisy show. They fired quickly, laughed at each other's shots, and bragged about who had the fanciest gear. But Amina saw something they didn't want others to notice: their shots weren't very accurate. They hit the board, yes, but most marks were scattered far from the center. Their confidence was loud, but their precision was not strong. Amina didn't smile or laugh. She simply noted it quietly in her mind. She told herself, "It doesn't matter what others say. All that matters is my own breath, my own focus, my own pace." The next round was about to begin. The lights flashed again. Amina felt a wave of calm rise in her chest. She was ready now, not because she wanted to prove anything to the Snobby men, but because she finally trusted her own rhythm. She lifted her hands again, steadier than before. Her elbows locked into place naturally, her back straight, her shoulders low. Her eyes found the center of the target and stayed there. Her breath slowed. In, out. In, out. She could hear nothing but that sound. And this time, she knew she wouldn't lower her hands. She was going to take the shot. Amina lifted her hands with the calm she had been building since the moment she walked into the range. The signal light above the lane glowed. The room hummed with energy, short sounds from other lanes, footsteps on the clean floor, low voices speaking in careful tones. Yet in her mind, everything softened to a quiet center. It was just her, a white sheet at a distance, and a promise she had made to herself long ago: try with patience, not pride. She set her feet with small adjustments, the way a person settles into a chair before reading a favorite book. Her shoulders relaxed. Her neck stayed straight. Her eyes found the middle of the target and held there. The white ring seemed to breathe with her. In, out. In, Out. No rush. No noise inside her thoughts. Behind her, the trio murmured to each other. One of them cleared his throat, as if ready to make another joke. The second shifted his stance and pretended not to watch her, though he peeked over every other second. The third, the loudest one, smirked with a kind of restless energy, like somebody who wanted the world to notice him. Their chatter reached her ears but did not enter her heart. She kept that quiet space safe. She remembered the first time she learned to stitch a straight line on fabric. Her grandmother had taught her at a square wooden table by the window. "Don't press too hard," her grandmother had said, "and don't rush. Let your hand be gentle and exact." Amina smiled a little at that memory. The sunlight had fallen in warm stripes on the floor that day, and the thread had glided through the cloth like it knew where to go. She thought about that feeling now. The friendly staff member who had encouraged her earlier walked past her lane again. He didn't speak this time, just gave a small thumbs up. It was a quiet sign, and it mattered to her. Farther down the line, the range officer's steps were steady and unhurried. She checked each lane with the same level gaze, the same attention. When she reached Amina's station, she paused for a second. She looked at Amina's posture, at the way her shoulders rested, at her focus on the target. The officer's eyes softened. She nodded once and moved on. The nod felt like a gentle hand on Amina's back, reminding her that she could trust herself. Amina let another breath go. She could feel the slight tremble in her fingers leave, not all at once, but gradually, the way a pond becomes still after a pebble's ripples fade. She noticed small details, the faint ticking of a clock near the reception area, the smooth pattern of the floor, the way the air felt cool against her cheek. These details did not distract her, they grounded her. One of the men whispered, "She's making a ceremony out of it." Another snorted, "Maybe she thinks the target will move closer if she waits long enough." The third chuckled under his breath. Their words dropped like dry leaves and stayed there, far away from Amina's focus. She decided something clear in that moment. She would not try to impress anyone. She would not try to answer the laughter. She would not try to be a hero in a story. She would do one honest thing, one careful attempt, done with respect for the rules, respect for herself, and respect for everyone else in the room. The signal light flickered again for the next round. The room's rhythm shifted. Amina's breath lined up with the timing as if a conductor had lifted a hand and asked the orchestra to be ready. She was ready. Her gaze settled on the center ring, that tiny circle that looked almost unreal from where she stood. It was far away, but not unreachable. She thought of steady rain drawing a single clear line down a window. She thought of writing her name slowly, neatly, on the first page of a new notebook. She thought of standing at a bus stop and seeing the bus coming from a distance, becoming clearer with every second. The center ring held like that an image coming into perfect shape. She felt the weight in her hands, and she did not fear it. She did not fight it, either. She acknowledged it, the way a traveler accepts the handle of a suitcase before walking forward. She breathed in. She breathed out. Everything aligned. The world did not disappear, it simply gave her space. A voice from the trio rose again, a joking sound that tried to sneak into the quiet she had built. But it dissolved as soon as it reached the border of her focus. She had a soft wall inside her, and it kept her attention safe. She did not push away the noise, she just did not invite it to stay. Her body understood the moment before her mind did. The tremble left her fingers. The air seemed lighter. Even the white sheet at the end of the lane appeared stiller, like a lake early in the morning. Time felt friendly, not demanding. Amina let her breath fall into a natural rhythm, no counting, no plan, just trust. She remembered a phrase she had once written in a small journal, "Peace is a steady hand." She had scribbled it on a day when she felt scattered and unsure. Now, in this bright hall, with people all around and a task in front of her, The sentence returned like a companion. She followed that companion into the exact present. Not a second earlier, not a second later. There was a clean, brief sound. It startled no one. It surprised no one. It was simply part of the room's music, a single note, placed where it belonged. Amina did not move right away. She did not look around to see if anyone had noticed. She did not raise her chin or lower her gaze. She stayed in the small quiet she had made, and let the moment pass through. She took another breath. Then, with care, she lowered her hands and rested them on the bench. She made sure everything was safe and still. She unclenched her jaw and rolled her shoulders once, gently, the way a dancer eases out of a pose. The room felt a little different. It was not louder or quieter, it was simply attentive. A few lanes down, someone paused in their own activity and glanced in her direction. The friendly staff member turned his head. The range officer had already begun to walk the line to check targets and keep everyone on routine. The trio's laughter didn't ring out this time. Something in their corner had gone still too. A printer near the check desk buzzed, as if it had been waiting for a cue. A paper's edge lifted and fell. Footsteps moved across the floor, measured, unhurried steps that respected the pace of the place. Amina kept her stance neat and gave the lane its space, the way she had been taught. She felt glad she had waited until she was truly ready. No rush. No show. She picked up her water bottle and took a small sip. The cool liquid matched her calm. She realized her hands were steady now. Not stiff, not strained, just steady. She smiled at that. It felt like a private gift she had earned by being patient with herself. The friendliest of the three men, the one who had joked least, opened his mouth as if to say something, then stopped. His eyes were on the far end of the lane. His expression did not mock or roll, it surged. The loudest one rubbed the back of his neck. The third tilted his head and squinted. Their fancy gear glinted under the lights, but the shine seemed to matter less in this minute. Even loud people can grow quiet when they sense something honest has happened. Amina did not turn to them. She looked ahead, respectful and composed. The range officer reached the far end of the lanes. A few other participants waited for her signal to begin their checks. Amina listened to the soft chorus of movements, a paper sliding, a switch clicking, a shoe sole brushing the floor. It all added up to a calm pattern. She liked patterns. Patterns made the world feel safe. Memories drifted through her mind like slow clouds. Her cousin's teasing comment. The receptionist's cheerful welcome. The weight of the earmuffs the first time she put them on. The friendly staffer's gentle advice, one good shot is better than 10 rushed ones. And that nod from the officer, steady as a lighthouse. Each detail had met her and nudged her a little closer to faith in herself. She did not feel triumphant. She did not feel dramatic. She felt clear. That clarity was better than victory, it was something she could carry out the door and into other parts of her life. She could bring it to her work, to her relationships, to any room where she felt out of place. Clarity says, you can be here. You can be yourself. Let your actions speak. A small group of newcomers entered from the reception area. They glanced around, curious. One of them, a young woman with a careful gaze, looked at Amina and then at the tidy space of the lane. The newcomer seemed relieved to see a face that was not loud or proud, just calm and present. Amina gave her a small nod. It was a brief, human moment that asked nothing and offered everything. Back at the far end, under bright lights, the range officer reached Amina's target sheet. She paused. She leaned slightly forward and looked. The room did not know what she saw yet, it only knew that she was looking. A quiet spread, line by line, lane by lane. People sense when something important is being understood. The printer near the check desk hummed again, and a short strip of paper eased out with that same gentle mechanical patience. The friendly staffer glanced at the display panel and then at the officer. He said nothing. He folded his arms loosely, as if to keep his hands from reacting before his face did. Amina's heartbeat had stayed calm for longer than she expected. Now it fluttered a little. Not with fear, but with simple anticipation. She had taken one step forward. Whatever followed would follow. She had done the part that was hers. That was enough. The trio finally spoke, but not loudly. "Did you see where it landed?" one of them asked. "Can't tell from here," another admitted. The loudest one cleared his throat and shrugged. The edges of their voices were different now. Not sharp. Not teasing. Just curious. Amina set her bottle down. She adjusted the strap of her ear protection. She straightened a small wrinkle in the sleeve of her simple jacket. Each tiny action returned her to steady ground. She did not script a reaction in her mind. She did not prepare a speech for if someone praised her or teased her again. She stayed open to the next honest thing. The range officer turned slightly, as if to face the room, and then thought better of it. She looked back at the sheet once more, exact and careful, as was her nature. Then she reached for the small control panel at the end of the lane. Her hand hovered there for a beat. The air seemed to hold its own breath. The panel clicked, and the quiet sound seemed to travel down the bright hallway like a small bell. At the far end, Amina's white target sheet began to glide toward her along its narrow track. Everyone knew this part of the routine: no rush, no crowding, eyes forward, hands still. Yet the room felt different, as if a gentle breeze had passed through and asked people to pause. Amina stood with her shoulders relaxed and her hands resting on the bench, exactly as the range rules taught. She had done her single, honest attempt. Now the lane would reveal what it carried back from the distance. She did not lean or crane her neck. She waited. The friendly staff member folded his arms loosely and watched the sheet roll in. The range officer, calm as ever, kept walking her line with quiet steps, still checking other stations, yet clearly aware that many eyes had drifted toward Amina's lane. Down the row, the trio of polished jackets had fallen silent. The loudest among them tapped a toe on the floor but said nothing. The one with the sharp smirk had lost it, his mouth was a flat line. The third looked uncertain, not unkind, just unsure of what to do when noise no longer led the way. The target sheet arrived and stopped smoothly, anchored in place with a soft click. Amina exhaled once and took a small step forward, careful to respect the boundary. The range officer reached the end of the lane at the same moment and leaned in with a measured glance. There it was, one clear mark, right through the very center ring. Not near, not close center. The kind of precise touch that looks simple when you see it and entirely impossible when you try to force it. The paper around it was clean and neat. It was a quiet proof, not a shout. The officer's eyes warmed. She didn't make a show of it, she simply gave a tiny nod that said, "Yes. That is what steady focus looks like." Amina felt the truth of the moment without drama. Relief arrived, but it did not flood her, it settled like fresh water in a clear glass. She had trusted her breath, her posture, and her patience. She had not hurried to answer laughter or to impress anyone. She had stayed with the simple plan she'd formed, one careful try, done with respect. Near the reception desk, the little printer hummed again and fed out a tidy strip, then another. The staffer glanced at the numbers and gave a small, unshowy smile. A couple of regulars down the line exchanged a look that was half surprise and half appreciation. Not a single clap sounded, yet this was a place where people kept routine but heads dipped, and shoulders eased, as if the whole room had taken in a slow breath together. "Lane okay?" the officer asked Amina, still professional, still even. "Yes," Amina replied, her voice steady. "Good work," the officer said. "Clean focus. Thank you for being patient with the process." "Thank you," Amina answered. She meant it. The officer's calm had been like a lighthouse present even when Amina did not look directly at it. The trio moved a fraction closer. Not enough to break etiquette, but enough to be noticed. The loudest one appeared to search for a joke and couldn't find any. The second ran a hand along the side of his shiny case, as if trying to remember why that shine had seemed so important a few minutes ago. The third he looked at Amina's target and then at his own, which had marks scattered like raindrops in a storm. He let out a breath and closed his case with care. "Nice work," said the friendly staff member, keeping his voice low so it reached only the people it needed to. "One honest attempt, done right. That's the sport." Amina smiled softly. "Thank you." The staffer glanced at the trio. They stood without bluster, which was new for them. He nodded once in their direction, a quiet reminder that respect is free to give and easy to recognize when you see it. A pair of newcomers, an older woman and a teenage girl, perhaps a grandmother and granddaughter, had just finished reading the posted rules. They looked toward Amina's lane, then at the center mark, then at Amina herself. The girl's shoulders lifted with hope. The older woman's face softened. Amina offered them both a small nod, the kind that says, "You can take your time here. You belong." The room began to move again, but with a different rhythm. People returned to their lanes, yet the mood had shifted from noise to care. Words sounded gentler. Steps were less showy, more measured. It was the kind of change that doesn't need an announcement, it simply spreads because people feel better in a calmer space. "Would you like to continue?" the officer asked, standing at a respectful distance. "You may take another turn, or you may clear your lane and rest." Amina looked at the center mark, then at her hands. Her promise to herself had been simple: try the sport honestly, with full safety and respect, and do not chase attention. She had kept that promise. She decided not to rush into a second try. One clear moment was enough for today. "I'll rest," she said. "And watch a bit, if that's okay." "Of course," the officer replied. "Thank you for keeping your lane tidy." Amina followed the steps she had learned, orderly, unhurried, careful, and set everything down in the right place. She took the empty lane as a small win, a space that she had filled with attention and then returned in good condition. It felt respectful, like leaving a borrowed room cleaner than when you found it. The friendly staff member printed a small record of her attempt and offered it to her. "For your notes," he said gently. She accepted it with a grateful smile. The strip showed what the paper already told, a simple confirmation. She didn't need numbers to feel proud. Still, it was nice to tuck the proof into her pocket like a folded star. Down the row, the trio talked in quieter voices. "Beginner's luck," the loudest one said, but his voice did not carry strength. "Luck doesn't make a mark that clean," the second replied, not unkindly. The third shook his head. "She took her time. That's all. We hurry too much." Their words were not for Amina, they were for themselves. That was good. Everyone has a different path to learning, and the best lessons are the ones we give to our own hearts. Amina moved to a bench behind the lanes and sat where she could watch without crowding anyone. The grandmother and granddaughter set up at a beginner station, a few spots down. The officer walked them through the basics with the same stable voice, the same measured gestures. The teen looked over once at Amina, who lifted a hand in a little wave of support. The teen's mouth became a shy smile. The trio took new turns. Their posture changed: less display, more listening. The loudest one adjusted his stance like someone finally willing to hear advice. The second paused between tries and breathed with care. The third studied the center before doing anything else. Their next marks were not perfect, but they were better. Progress often sounds like that: no trumpet, just gentler footsteps towards something honest. A regular with a calm manner passed by Amina and gave a tiny nod. "It helps us all," he murmured, "when someone trusts patience." "Thank you," Amina said. Her words were simple, but the moment felt wide, like sunrise on a clear day. The receptionist from the front desk came by to tidy a stack of reminder cards near the benches. "How was your first time?" she asked, cheerful as always, but softer now. "Meaningful," Amina replied. The receptionist's eyes flicked to the target sheet still at the lane end. She had seen many like it and many unlike it. "You made the room quieter," she said with a smile. "That's rare." Amina laughed a little. "I didn't speak." "Sometimes the best way to speak is to act kindly," the receptionist said, tucking the cards into a neat pile. One of the trio, the third, the one who had looked unsure, approached Amina's bench. He stopped at the right distance. I said unhelpful things earlier," he began, clearing his throat. "That wasn't fair." Amina looked up, her expression open. "Thank you for saying that." He nodded, relieved. "You were very focused." She smiled. "It was one attempt. I'm still learning." "Me too," he admitted, and for the first time that day, his voice sounded like it matched his heart. He returned to his lane, and his next try was calmer. The loudest one glanced at Amina, then at his friend, and then back at his own station with a face that looked more thoughtful than proud. Step by step, the room's energy found a better shape. The officer, after finishing a cycle of checks, returned to Amina and held up the target sheet with the center mark. "Would you like to keep this?" she asked. "We sometimes pin strong examples on the board for Community Day, but only with permission." Amina looked at the neat, precise center and thought of why she had come, not to be a symbol, but to believe in herself. She liked the idea of the paper quietly encouraging a beginner she might never meet. "You can pin it," she said. "If you think it helps someone." "It will," the officer answered. "Thank you." They walked together to the community board near the reception. The officer used two small pins and placed the sheet in a corner where it wouldn't overshadow others. Above it, a simple sign read, "Respect everyone. Practice with care." It felt exactly right. People passed by and saw the center mark. No flash, no crowd, just a shared understanding that the sport could be gentle and exact at the same time. The grandmother and granddaughter paused to look. The girl's eyes lit up. The grandmother gave Amina a grateful nod. The trio walked past without comments, and that silence was its own kind of praise. Amina returned to her bench and finished her water. She could leave now, proud in a quiet way. Yet she chose to sit for a few more minutes to watch the calm spread. She noticed that when the officer spoke, people leaned in a little more. When the staffer offered a tip, people tried it without arguing. Even the hum of the air system at the ceiling sounded kinder. The friendly staff member eventually came over, holding a small flyer. He didn't push it on her, he only presented it the way one offers an open door. "We're hosting a community day next month," he said. "Focus, safety, steady practice. Beginners and regulars. If you ever wish to share how patience helped you, we'd be glad to have you. No pressure." Amina accepted the flyer and tucked it into her pocket beside the tiny printed strip. "I'll think about it," she said with a calm smile. "That's all we ask," he replied. On the other side of the room, the signal lights blinked for a fresh round. People lifted their hands, not to show off, but to try again with care. The trio worked in quiet harmony, each adjusting their stance before attempting anything. The grandmother whispered something kind to the teen, who took a steady breath and found her center. Amina stood, smoothed the front of her simple jacket, and looked once more at the board where her target hung. It belonged to the room now, to the atmosphere they had built together for an hour. She felt ready to carry that feeling out the door and into other places: work, errands, the bus, a conversation with someone who felt shy. She walked to the exit without hurry. At the glass doors, she turned and offered the room a gentle nod. In return, The room gave her what it had been giving all along, a space where patience counts, where respect makes things clear, and where a single well-placed action can change the tone for everyone. Outside, the day was bright and simple. Amina stepped into it with the same steady rhythm she had found inside. She did not glow with pride or bounce with excitement. She moved with quiet joy, the kind that lasts. Behind her, in the hall, a small sound rose and fell as the next target sheet slid forward on its track. The sport went on, a little kinder than before. Amina walked home from the range with an easy, steady rhythm, the same rhythm she had found inside the bright hall. The city seemed softer that day, shops opening their shutters with a friendly clatter, neighbors watering plants on balconies, a bus sighing to a stop as people stepped on and off with morning patience. She carried no trophy and had made no big announcement. She carried only a folded printout in her pocket and a feeling inside her chest that was calm and bright, like a lamp with a warm shade. At home, she placed the printout on her small wooden desk. The desk had seen her through many ordinary tasks: paying bills, answering messages, writing short lists. Today it held proof of something new, something simple but strong. She did not frame it, not yet. She slid it into a clean envelope and tucked the envelope into a drawer where she kept her grandmother's sewing kit. The kit still smelled faintly of cotton and lavender. Amina smiled at the thought that two quiet skills now lived side by side, the art of a steady stitch and the art of a steady breath. The week moved forward in its usual way: work, chores, a visit to the market, a call with her cousin. The cousin asked, with a curious tone, "So, did you really go to that place?" Amina said yes and kept her story short. She did not mention the trio's jokes or the exact result. She simply said, "It was peaceful in its own way. I learned to trust my patience." Her cousin made a surprised sound that turned into a thoughtful silence. Sometimes the simplest answers plant the deepest seeds. In the evenings, Amina took her regular walks. She noticed details she had missed before: the careful sweep of a shopkeeper brushing dust off the doorstep, the exact way sunlight pressed through a row of leaves, the timbre of a child's laugh when it is carried by wind. Whenever her mind wandered to heavy thoughts, she returned to breath. In, out. Not as a ritual, not as a show, but as a kind way to greet herself. On Thursday she found the small flyer from the range in her jacket pocket. The community day would happen in 2 weeks. The words on the paper were simple: focus, safety, steady practice, everyone welcome. Her first instinct was to fold the flyer back and leave it for later. But she paused. She remembered the teenage girl and the grandmother with kind eyes. She remembered the room growing gentler without anyone making a speech. Maybe she could show up and share something small. Not a lesson, not a performance, just a lived example that patience can be a path. Amina left the flyer on her desk in the open, where the sunlight touched it in the afternoon. She did not decide right away. She let the idea sit like clean water in a glass. The next week, the receptionist from the range sent a short message. It was friendly and brief, just like the woman herself: Community Day next Saturday. If you'd like to attend, we'd be happy to see you. No pressure. Amina smiled at the familiar phrase. No pressure. That was the tone she trusted. On Saturday morning, Amina returned to the range. The glass doors reflected a clear sky. Inside, the hall looked the same: bright lights, polished floor, the hum of a place that values care. Yet she felt different as she stepped in. She did not feel like a guest testing a room. She felt like a person returning to a good library, quiet, useful, open to everyone. The range officer greeted her with the same steady calm. "Nice to see you again," the officer said. "Thank you for coming." "Happy to be here," Amina replied. Near the community board, her target sheet still hung in the corner with its small, exact mark at the center. It did not stand alone. Several other sheets had joined it during the week, some with grouped marks near the middle, some with a single neat touch, some with patterns that showed hard-earned progress. Above the cluster, the sign read the same as before: respect everyone. Practice with care. The board looked like a wall of gentle stories. The trio from that first day arrived as well, though they were quieter than before. Their polished jackets had been replaced by simple shirts. They set their cases on the counter with less noise and read the posted reminders with real attention. The loudest one nodded to Amina from a respectful distance. She returned the nod. The second lifted a hand half in greeting, half in apology. The third, the one who had spoken to her after part 4, approached with a slight smile. "Good morning," he said. "I learned something from watching you." Amina answered with an easy warmth. "Good morning. I learned something from watching the room." He seemed to understand. "We're trying to be less fast," he said, searching for the right word. "Fast has its place," Amina replied kindly. "But focus likes a steady pace." The community day began with a short talk from the officer. No long speech, no spotlight. She spoke about safety, about listening, about giving others space to learn. She said a line that made heads tilt in agreement: "This hall is a place where patience is visible." Amina liked that phrase. She had felt it before, now she heard it. The participants formed small groups. Amina offered to help with the section for beginners, not to instruct, but to stand near and share small reminders when asked. The grandmother and granddaughter arrived, the teen looking a little less shy than before. Amina waved, and they came over. "Would you like me to watch your routine," Amina asked the teen, "and tell you the good things I notice?" The teen lit up. "Yes, please." What Amina noticed first was not a stance or emotion. It was care. The teen read the rule card out loud to herself. She checked her space twice. She asked a question before moving on. These were small, strong steps. Amina said so. The teen's shoulders lowered with relief. "People often look for big tips," Amina said gently. "But small habits hold us up. You're doing them already." Near them, the trio practiced with a new rhythm. The loudest one paused between tries and gave a small nod of approval to a newcomer in the next lane. The second tried a simple breath pattern and waited an extra beat before starting. The third kept glancing at his own target with a thoughtful gaze, not with frustration. After a while, he asked the officer a practical question about routine. She answered with clarity. He thanked her with sincere respect. The friendly staff member moved along the lines with soft encouragement. "No rush," he told a young man whose hands were too tight. "Let your shoulders remember they are part of you, not in charge of you," he said to a woman who kept lifting them in tension. He didn't change who people were, he helped them meet themselves with kindness. Amina admired his work. It looked simple, which means it was done with great care. When the break came, people gathered near the benches for tea and water. Conversations were easy. No one argued about gear. No one pushed for attention. Amina found herself standing beside the receptionist, who had set out a tray of small lemon biscuits. "I see your paper still on the board," the receptionist said. "It belongs to the room," Amina replied. The receptionist's smile grew. "That's why it fits there." A woman with a notebook approached Amina shyly. "I'm writing about hobbies that teach calm," she said. "May I write one sentence about what you learned?" "One sentence is good," Amina said with a small laugh. "I learned that quiet discipline can change the mood of a whole room." The woman wrote it down, thanked her, and moved on. A sentence that short carries well. After the break, the officer invited volunteers to share one thought that had helped them. Amina did not step forward right away. She waited to see if a beginner wanted the space. The teenager raised her hand first. "My thought is, reading the rules is like holding a map," she said. "It makes me feel safe." People nodded and smiled. The grandmother placed a proud hand on the girl's shoulder. Then the third member of the trio lifted his hand. "My thought is, it's better to speak kindly than loudly," he said. He did not look at anyone in particular, yet several faces softened in response. The loudest of the trio smiled at the floor, a little embarrassed, but in a way that made him look human and open. The officer looked around the circle. Anyone else? Amina felt a tap of courage rise from her quiet center. She raised her hand. "I learned I don't need to prove anything to take a single honest step," she said. "One step can open a door for other people too." Her voice was easy and clear. It did not tremble. It did not reach for drama. It carried as far as it needed to and then rested. The day moved forward with practice and small talks. Some people showed their papers to friends. Some chose to keep their papers private. Amina stayed near the beginners, watching for the moment when a face changed from tight to soft, from doubtful to steady. That change was her favorite side of the day. It looked the way morning looks when a cloud thins and the sun comes through. When the community day ended, the officer thanked everyone for their attention and patience. People clapped softly, not for the officer alone, but for each other. The trio approached Amina one last time. The loudest one spoke first, his tone sincere. "I'm sorry for the way I acted before," he said. "It wasn't fair. Today felt better." "Thank you," Amina replied. "I appreciate your words." The second added, "Your calm helped us find ours." "Maybe we all helped each other," Amina said, and they agreed. As the hall cleared, the friendly staff member handed Amina a small envelope. Inside was a note card with 4 words written in neat print, "Thank you for patience." There was no signature. She did not need one. The room had written it together. On her way out, Amina paused at the board. New papers would come and go, that was the way of things. But the message above them would remain: respect everyone. Practice with care. She touched the edge of her sheet lightly and then let it be. The sky outside was turning a soft afternoon blue. She stopped at a park on her walk home, sat on a bench, and watched 2 children invent a game with a stick, a bottle cap, and an old leaf. Their rules were simple and real, created on the spot and followed with laughter. Amina felt a quiet, happy echo. Every place can be a classroom when people bring kindness to it. At home, she made tea and opened her grandmother's sewing kit. A shirt had been waiting for a tiny repair. She threaded a needle with slow care, and the thread slipped through on the first try. The stitch she made was small and steady, nearly invisible when she was done. She smoothed the cloth and sat back. Her phone buzzed with a message from the cousin, "How was your morning?" Amina sent a photo of the park and wrote, "Calm and useful." A minute later, the cousin replied, "I might come with you next time. Not to do everything, but to watch how people carry themselves." Amina smiled. That sounded right. Watching is a kind of learning, too. Evening gathered. Lights came on in windows. Amina placed the Community Day flyer back in the drawer, not because it was over, but because its lesson now lived in her routine. She did not plan grand goals. She did not schedule a list of achievements. She chose something smaller and more powerful, to bring her steady breath into each day's simple tasks. Weeks later, she would return to the range again, sometimes to practice, sometimes just to sit and offer a few words to a newcomer who looked unsure. She would keep the same quiet style, the same respect for others' space. People would remember her not for loud victories, but for a feeling: the room was kinder when she was there. And that, more than any printed score, was the center she had been aiming for all along, a center that did not live only on a paper ring, but in the way people treat each other when patience is visible. Amina felt the corners of her mouth lift, barely. She had made one true attempt. Whatever the officer saw on that white paper belonged to that attempt, not to noise, not to pride, not to fear. The moment had the shape of a held note in a song still sounding, not yet resolved. The friendly staff member met Amina's eyes for a second. His expression said, without words, "Well done, whatever comes next." It was the kind of look that builds communities steady, kind, free from show. The room waited. Not stiff, not tense, just attentive. Amina stood with that same quiet attention, ready to receive the next small piece of truth the day would offer. And then the panel clicked.